Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's great to be back, and welcome to the show. This is episode 102 of the Meet the Farmers podcast, and I'm Ben Eagle. It's January, and that means one thing, listeners. It's Oxford conference season, which this year means virtual conference season. Great news for my bank balance and my liver, I must say, but although they're different from the norm, the organisers have still managed to put on packed and engaging programmes. So yes, during the next couple of episodes, we'll be focusing on the Oxford Farming Conference and the Oxford Real Farming Conference. Today is the turn of the OFC, which actually took place yesterday because we're recording this on the Friday. And with that in mind, I'm thrilled to be joined by Sally Williams, who was chair of the Oxford Farming Conference this year. She's also a dairy farmer from Scotland, and by a man who needs absolutely no introduction on this show, but I'm going to give him one anyway. The one and only Will Evans, an arable and beef farmer from North Wales, who does the occasional podcast in his spare time. And excitingly, as from today, he is officially a director of the OFC. Well, do I have the pleasure of being the first person to interview you as in that role?
I suppose you do, Ben. Yeah, it's quite terrifying, really. It sounds still all of a sudden.
Oh well, thanks so much for coming on to you both. Sally, it's the 75th anniversary of the OFC. What was your initial reaction when it dawned on you that the conference would be done virtually this year?
Yeah, in a funny way, it's hard to remember because it's been such a long journey. When COVID hit, I remember confidently saying at our last face-to-face council meeting, way back in February, March time, that COVID would be gone by conference time. What on earth were we doing discussing the possibility of COVID not still being there? The country would be in a mess, and the conference would be the least of our worries. And little did I know that we were pretty much going to be in lockdown for the next 9 months, and I was not going to set foot in Oxford again as an Oxford director, nor was I going to see any of my fellow colleagues face to face. But once realization dawned, it was the morning of our council meeting. We were due to have a big discussion about the format and the programme. And I woke up that morning, heard on the news that things were getting worse, not better. It was supposed to be the end of the first lockdown. And I just had an epiphany and binned the agenda for the day. And we just discussed, right, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
For us, Oxford was way too important to not hold it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just became a case of, right, let's start from scratch. What are the absolute key bits, and how do we make the delegate experience as much as possible? So in a funny way, and apologies because this is a very long answer, but for me personally, I am not somebody who is very good at following and just doing what somebody else did before me.
Yeah.
So in a funny way, for me personally, as much as I would love to be face to face, this was the best conference for me because I wasn't going to be measured against anything that had gone before me. This was brand new, and I was going to either live or die on my own sword. It made no difference what had come before. So it was great for me. It suited my temperament.
Yeah. And of course, one of the things you introduced this year, which I think has been absolutely brilliant, has been the Bite Size series.
Yeah, that was a real opportunity because we knew that by going virtual, we weren't going to be able to mark the 75th conference with big parties and face-to-face celebrations. But we had to acknowledge the incredible work that the conference has done and the directors that have gone before me and before Will to deliver something. And luckily, we had enough months to fit in 7 bite sizes celebrating those 7 decades. And what has always struck me about Oxford and what's always been quite stressful as a director is just how forward thinking they've always been. But what always saddens me in agriculture is that we could still take those conference themes from the 1930s and make it relevant to today. So the conversations I do think have moved on, but it just goes to show the power of those directors that chose those themes, that were discussing things that at the time were really cutting edge.
Yeah. And the main theme that you came up with has been business as unusual. Who came up with that title, and what was? Take us through the thinking behind it.
I drove my directors bananas talking about it, and it's always the most controversial discussion, to decide how is it going to go. And again, for me as chairman, it probably took me a little while to flick from being a conference director into actually leading everybody.
Yeah.
And I was so busy wanting it to be a consensus that we spent far too long talking about it. And then inspiration struck and on we went. But it really was about trying to sum up. At the start of the year, it was really Brexit we were thinking about. And it's hard to believe, because in a funny way, Brexit's kind of moved on and everybody's just so worried about COVID and thinking about COVID all the time. But it was all about Brexit and how were we going to cope. And there was so much uncertainty with Brexit, never mind COVID, but we were all still farming, we were all still getting on. The wider industry was still relatively resilient. And it was about reflecting that, we kept being told plan for Brexit, but how are you supposed to plan for something when you've got absolutely no guidance and no direction? So it was really to be exploring how were we just continuing business in these disruptive and unusual times.
I mean, it was an absolutely packed program, and like with all these things, whether you're going to something face to face or whether you're going to something virtual, your experience is going to be my experience was very different as someone who was just rocking up to this thing than yours was, obviously, as the chair of the thing. But give me a highlight for you.
Well, the highlight unquestionably was the debate. That just
Yeah.
was the most perfect ending to the day imaginable. That my fear had been that by the end of the day, people would have been, had major screen fatigue and wouldn't have engaged. Our 4 speakers just knocked it so far out the park. It was out of this world. The energy, I was sitting with the biggest grin on my face during the whole thing, because it was exactly what the debate should be. It's a light-hearted, fun end to a very serious, heavy day. So for me, without a shadow of a doubt, the debate was my absolute highlight of the day.
Yeah. Will, what about you? Was it the debate?
Probably not.
I should say, Will put an absolutely stonking performance last night. He was brilliant.
I was very nervous. I had a very large whiskey just before when my Musin was doing his talk. I thought about it this morning. I really enjoyed the politics session in the morning, having the 4 ministers there and seeing their different approaches, and they were all very civil on the surface, but there was that sort of simmering tension underneath, which I picked up on and enjoyed. But I think probably like of the program was Angus Davidson in the Inspiring Farmers session. I thought, I mean, he did exactly what it says on the tin, really, with the Inspiring Farmers, and his story really is something else. And my favourite slide of the day was the one he used, and no decks, stars only, and surround yourself by mentors, allies, and brilliant people, and that just really struck a chord with me as someone who sort of, for a long time, didn't particularly engage with wider industry, just very much focused on my own farm. It's only when I think got involved at Oxford as an emerging leader that started to work for me as well, and just the inspiration I've taken from that by back to my own business from meeting so many inspiring people in the wider industry has been something that's really worked for me as well, and his story's just so incredible.
Yeah. And you mentioned the politics session there. Let's start with that. And yeah, I mean, you treated us to I think that's the right word, all 4 people responsible for agriculture across the home nations. Did we learn anything new, do you reckon? And were there any differences between their visions? I know that's something that people have picked up. Sally?
I think this is the first year we did learn something new, and it was on a number of levels. First and foremost, by having all 4, it's very rare that we actually have that comparison side by side of the completely different paths that the 4 nations of the UK are taking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, as a Scottish farmer, it was so important to get that message across that when we're talking as an industry, we always talk about UK ag, and that's great. But what we have to remember is when we're thinking about trade deals and when we're thinking about the future, how are we actually going to have that coming together? Agriculture is a devolved issue, and I think it gets forgotten about quite a lot in the other nations, that we're all on completely different paths. So I think that from a delegate perspective, but also reminding the politicians themselves that we're all doing different things. It's very easy, and especially in COVID, to have ended up in our little bubble surrounded by people who are all in the same thought process. and then there was the actual policy from each of them. I thought it was really great to have that coherence. George Eustace had used us to launch his transition roadmap back at the end of November, and so I felt that yesterday was then the next step in that. It was a very specific part of this transition plan he was talking about, with the gene editing consultation being opened up. And then you heard partly the response from the other politicians, how they welcomed or did not welcome that consultation. But I think what was lovely, though, was that at the end of it, interestingly, they were all talking about it being farmer focused.
Yep.
Instead of them telling us what to do, they were pulling more farmers into their groups, and hopefully we'll have less to complain about at the other end. But I doubt it somehow.
Yeah. And one of my favourite sessions was definitely the Frank Parkinson lecture, which John Elkington delivered. And in that, he was arguing that current practice when it comes to sustainability doesn't go nearly far enough in terms of tackling the various crises that we're faced with, from climate to biodiversity to health. Do you think that the way that we talk about sustainability has changed over the last few years when it comes to the OFC? Will, I'm perhaps going to ask you that as an incoming director.
Yeah, I think so. Well, this is my fourth conference now. And I think even in that very short time, there's been much more focus on sustainability and the environment. I did something else not long ago, and I actually looked up the meaning, the dictionary definition of sustainability, because it's one of those words you hear a lot, and I wondered what the exact meaning of it was. And there's lots of different definitions of it, but the one I settled on was it means meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And if you look at it in that form, a huge amount of the talk at Oxford is about that, really, and how as farmers we can be more efficient and improve production, but how we're going to do that in a way that also doesn't have a negative impact on the environment. Now, I don't want to speak for previous conferences that I wasn't at, but just from my own experience over the last sort of 20 years since I left university, when I was there, it just wasn't even talked about. The environment wasn't talked about. It was all about production, producing as much food as we can efficiently as possible. So I would imagine the conference would have reflected that. But now when you look at it, we're all talking about the environment, how we can minimize our impact, how we can farm in a way that means our children can then farm successfully as well. And I think that's something that we're all hugely encouraged by and can only see being increased in future conferences.
Yeah, I mean, Sally, in your time as a director, would you say that the priorities, the emphasis of the conference has altered in any way?
It's a hard one to measure, because when you're in the thick of it, you don't notice change happening.
Yeah.
But I think OFC's biggest challenge is conveying what we actually genuinely do. I think we are branded as being something that I don't believe we are. Quite often we're held up as being representative of big ag. Now, I am sitting here speaking to you with a buff around my neck. I've just jumped out of my covered leggings, left my bellies at the door, having AI'd 15 cows this morning.
Yeah.
Oh, if that's big ag, then we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
I think we've. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the strength of Oxford, and I actually said it in my closing yesterday, is our directors. So every year, 3 new, or 4, as is the case this year, new directors join and 3 leave. So there's a very quick turnover, and conference is shaped by the directors, and it's by a huge, broad background and remit. And I was lucky enough to first go to conference in 2009 or 10. Apologies, my memory fails me. And back then, the environment was being talked about, but yes, it was being talked about as the nice to do rather than the need to do. So I think as an industry, we've changed. But I think as Oxford, it's always been where we've been driving to. I spoke at it in 2014. I was under 30. So again, if it's a big ag conference, what on earth was an under 30-year-old dairy farmer doing standing on that stage commanding attention? So I think OFC has been talking about sustainability for years. I think the meaning, as Will has just said, the definition of sustainability has changed for the industry. Yep. And I think Oxford has moved with it, but has also led it. Way back, we were talking about the sustainability of business. And now we're talking about it on a much bigger level.
I mean, we can't talk about OFC without talking about the traditional debate, which I'm really glad still happened this year. Big tick in the box for you to making it happen still. And of course, this year it didn't have the usual splendor of the surroundings, but the quality definitely didn't disappoint. Because, of course, Will Evans was taking part, so it was always going to be. But the motion was: this House believes that first generation farmers are better than fourth. We all had a lot of fun. Your take on the debate?
Yeah, first of all, I got kind of shanghaied into that by Tom Davitt, because Tom sent me a message and said, "Will, would you be the reserve speaker if anyone pulls out at the last minute?" And I said, sure I will, because no one's going to pull out at the last minute. And I think the next day I was copied into an email with all the other speakers, and it just sort of assumed I was part of it. What's happened here? Yeah, it was really, really interesting. I mean, I think I could have made a very convincing argument the other way as well, for first generation farmers, though it would have obviously sounded a bit odd coming from me, being a multi-generation farmer. But I could very much see both sides. I really enjoyed working with Peter Wiggins-Davies. What a character he is.
Yep.
Safe to say we don't move in the same social circles, but he, what a story his family have got. The links to his estate going back several hundred years, and I thought the two first generation farmers were absolutely fantastic. Nikki and Lucen, they were brilliant. I mean, their enthusiasm, and it's easy to think, well, fourth generation farmers will be more passionate about it. But what I liked was they were equally passionate about it, and I think it just shows that do need first generation farmers and multi-generation farmers in the industry, and that's what we need. I don't think anybody questions, as Sally said, it'd be fun, and hopefully people took it at that. But yeah, brilliant thing to be involved in. It's a real honour.
Yeah, I mean, so you pick up on this, and in some way that's picking at diversity, but we can go much further. And for me, I think this conference took diversity to whole new levels. Sally?
Well, thank you very much, because it was something that has been on the forefront of our mind. That at last year's conference, Matt Naylor did an incredible fringe session looking at diversity in agriculture, which Will also spoke at. It seems that there must be a well, we've run out of speaking slots for him, so we've made him a director, so he has to still be on stage. Yeah, and what was very important to me was that rather than having diversity as a standalone session, not that I'm suggesting Matt ticked any boxes in that respect. It was brand new for any conference last year to have a standalone looking at diversity and really asking those difficult questions. But for me, the next step was then stitching that diversity message throughout. It wasn't about having a platform where we ticked every box on the diversity. It was about actually having that woven throughout the entirety of the conference. And for me, conference includes the bite sizes. So right the way through, making sure that every voice had a platform. And yeah, thank you for acknowledging that you thought we had achieved it. There's always room for improvement. But what I hope is that for those underrepresented groups out there who were thinking, why would I get involved in agriculture or look at this or think about that they actually saw throughout the year people that they could all relate to on a one-to-one, that reflected themselves. So thank you.
Well, you're now, of course, a director. Why did you want to become a director, and what's your personal plan, I suppose, as part of Team OFC for your time going forward?
Why did I want to become a director? I was asking myself that yesterday, seeing how hard all the directors work. It's quite an eye-opener. I suppose it was, as I mentioned earlier, I've not really got that involved in any wider industry things. And then going to the conference in 2018, I was just sort of blown away by it, really. I just loved it. From the very second I got there, the whole vibe of it, the friendliness. Obviously, you see so many inspirational speakers, and just being able to take that back to my own business. And really, I suppose the seed was planted then that perhaps I would like to be more involved. Went to the next few conferences as a delegate, and then one suggested to me that I should think about applying, and I thought, well, God, I can't do that. And look at the people who are already directors. I wouldn't not fit to be in that crowd. And then
even Sally talked about imposter syndrome yesterday. So
yeah, well, I mean, I think we all have it a bit, don't we? And that's been an important realization for me, that as I've got to know some of the really, truly quite brilliant people who I've met through Oxford Farming Conference, some of the emerging leaders, people like that. And it's very easy to look at them and think, well, God, they've got everything together. I haven't, wish I could be more like that. But when you get to know them, you realize that everyone has their problems there to overcome. Everybody has lack of self-confidence or whatever it may be. And I think that was, which may sound really simple to some people, but for me, obviously it just took a long time for the penny to drop. But yeah, a huge honor as well. Then, I was very nervous doing the interview. As Sally will know, my Zoom link crashed just before and I was late getting on. I've blown it already. And then I rambled on for about 20 minutes about nonsense. But hugely honored to get in. I'm so excited to be working with the existing directors. I think it's such a great balanced team, and the new directors. I mean, I spoke to Ben Taylor Davis the other night on the phone, one of the other new directors, and we were just saying what an exciting time it is to be starting, all the changes that are coming in farming, the new trading environment, and just the new sort of innovations in farming. What a brilliant time to be doing this. And yeah, so excited about the next 3 years. It's going to be a lot of hard work, but I'm sure it'll be all worth it when it's sell.
Fantastic.
I hope so. She's laughing.
It is, and it's funny because any chairman of anything, I think, goes through periods of, oh, this is beyond me, I can't do this, oh my God, why did I take this on? I've got enough going on in my personal life with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and trying to keep a farm going. But I am going to miss it so much. And it's what I said a lot yesterday. It's all about people. And COVID has highlighted that again, that I have worked with the most incredible team, my fellow directors, Archer Yates Associates, who do our secretariat, Jane Craigie Marketing's team have just absolutely fabulous, Hawk AV. And these guys have all become my friends. And I might sound a bit sad, desperate and clingy, but it's, that having these people to speak to all the time, it's made my year so enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yes, I was very stressed on Tuesday, Wednesday and yesterday. I'm not going to lie about that. When you've got 7 WhatsApp groups pinging madly at you, when your phone is going, when you've got delegate friends texting you funny things in the middle about, oh, what's Fergus Ewing got on his shelf behind him?
Yes.
I don't need to think about that right now.
was that Matt Naylor, Sal? Was that Matthew Naylor?
But equally, that was what was so lovely, knowing that so many of these people were with me. That yes, I was thinking about who's next and is everybody in the green room, and that was, hopefully Will is never going to have that challenge of my speaker hasn't logged on yet. Where are they? Because in the exam schools, you literally drag them to the green room, park them there, and say someone will come and get you and mic you up when we need you. Do not move, and it's very simple.
Yeah.
But online, when you've got 3 minutes to go and no speakers, it's like, right, who do I do first? But no, it's incredible, and I'm just so pleased that Will took that leap of faith and did apply. And Will, whatever you feel about your interview, I learned that that's how you do an interview. I was absolutely blown away, and I'm going to take a long hard look at how I've winged too many interviews in the past, and definitely learn from you, because you were so well prepared. It was brilliant.
Let's turn to next year. We're assuming we will be back in Oxford. What's the plan-ish at this stage? Probably maybe too early to tell. And what do you think we'll be talking about? Let's perhaps reflect on that. What do you reckon we'll be talking about in 12 months' time?
Well, what's the plan? Well, my WhatsApp pinged this morning, Marion Regan already making a suggestion about next year's conference. So, obviously people, and to be fair,
It's never too early.
with lots of ideas going. No, I know. Even over the last month or so, there's been loads of ideas going back and through about potential speakers and things like that. So, yeah, really excited. As you say, I really hope it can be in person. I think it's been wildly successful doing it online. It was brilliant. I've seen nothing but positive feedback about yesterday's conference. Just incredible job by all the directors pulling it all together. And I think all the delegates thoroughly enjoyed it and said it was as close as you can get to being in Oxford. But I think we all hope that it's in person next year. The bite-sized sessions will continue. We'll obviously have to talk about whether we'll have to do the conference. Perhaps some of it will have to be online. Some of it will have to be in person in Oxford. It's too early to tell. I mean,
but again,
the situation is changing all the time.
That might then reach more people as well, which again for me was a massive plus of this year.
Definitely, and I spoke to a few delegates around the tables who are from different countries and things like that. And it was their first time attending. So that's really encouraging. And also one or two people who were from various parts of the north of England and Scotland who said, I wouldn't normally go. It's too far for me, and it's difficult for me to get off the farm for 3 days. But I've really enjoyed being here. And interestingly, I said to them, "Well, do you think you will go next year in person?" And they answered very positively. So, that's exciting and just really does prove how the online offering has opened it up to a whole new audience. And I think that's just so exciting for the future of the conference, and it's something that we can only build on, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, that is all we have time for. But thank you very much to my guests today, Will Evans and Sally Williams. Next week, we'll be heading down the road, virtually at least, and I'll be joined by a new panel of guests to discuss the comings and goings at the Oxford Real Farming Conference. Until then, have a great week ahead. Happy New Year, and I'll see you next time.